In November 2024, satellites orbiting far above California confirmed something that can no longer be stopped. America's most productive farmland is collapsing, and it has already passed the point where stopping groundwater pumping would save it. In parts of the Central Valley, the ground is dropping nearly 2 feet every year. In just 16 years, more elevation has been lost than during the previous 50 combined. This is not erosion. This is not cracking soil. This is the permanent collapse of deep underground structures that once held the water feeding the nation. And once these structures fail, they do not recover. Ever. Researchers at Stanford University analyzing satellite data uncovered findings that should have dominated national headlines but barely reached the public. Aquifer systems thousands of feet underground are being crushed beyond repair. These formations took tens to hundreds of thousands of years to develop. In a few decades, their ability to store water is being erased forever. No future rainfall, no regulation, no technological breakthrough can restore what has already collapsed. This is not a distant warning. It is unfolding right now, and the consequences extend far beyond California. The Central Valley spans roughly 20,000 square miles and produces about 40% of all fruits, nuts, and vegetables consumed in the United States. It supplies roughly 80% of the world's almonds, 95% of U.S. processed tomatoes, and dominant shares of walnuts, pistachios, grapes, citrus, and leafy greens. This region does not just support American agriculture, it underpins global food supply chains. And it is sinking in ways that could permanently remove vast areas from production within decades. But the most alarming signal from space is not just that farmland is dropping, it's what is failing on top of it. As the land deforms, California's water infrastructure is breaking in real time. The California Aqueduct, the backbone of the state water project serving 27 million people, has developed deep bowl-shaped depressions where the ground has sunk so severely that water pools instead of flowing. Operators are forced to restrict deliveries simply to prevent overflow and system failure. The infrastructure still exists, but it is no longer functioning as designed. The Friant-Kern Canal reveals an even more disturbing reality. Differential subsidence, different sections sinking at different rates, has stripped the canal of nearly 60% of its capacity. In some areas, the canal bed now slopes uphill against the direction water is supposed to move. Engineers estimate $400 million in repairs, fully aware those fixes only delay failure. The ground beneath the canal continues to sink. In May 2025, California water managers issued projections that reframe the crisis entirely. If subsidence continues at current rates, water deliveries through the state water project could be cut by up to 87% within 20 years, not because water disappears, but because the infrastructure will no longer be physically capable of moving it across a collapsing landscape. Dr. Rosemary Knight, the Stanford geophysicist who led the November 2024 subsidence analysis, departed from the cautious language typical of academic hydrology. Her warning was direct. Aquifer storage capacity is being destroyed faster than even worst-case projections anticipated. Deep clay layers compacting thousands of feet below the surface will continue collapsing for decades, possibly centuries. Even if every groundwater pump stopped tomorrow, the damage already done would continue. California has been liquidating geological capital, crushing underground storage that took hundreds of thousands of years to form in order to sustain agriculture during drought. That debt is now unavoidable. So what are we actually witnessing? Is this a severe but still manageable crisis? One that tighter groundwater regulation and aggressive recharge programs can stabilize before the damage becomes catastrophic? Or has the Central Valley crossed an irreversible geological threshold where decades of overpumping triggered subsurface processes that will continue destroying aquifers and infrastructure regardless of future policy? Or does this collapse expose a deeper truth? That the system built to feed America, reliant on groundwater mining and infrastructure designed for stable ground, was fundamentally unsustainable from the beginning? To understand why the Central Valley is collapsing, you first have to understand what holds the ground up and why that support system has been systematically dismantled. The Central Valley is a massive geological basin, slowly filled over millions of years with sediments eroded from the Sierra Nevada to the east and the Coast Ranges to the west. Layer upon layer of sand, gravel, silt, and clay accumulated to depths of thousands of feet. The microscopic spaces between those particles hold water, forming one of the largest aquifer systems in the United States. Historically, snowmelt, rainfall, and river flows recharge these underground reserves, storing water beneath the valley floor like a natural savings account. Ground elevation depends on the integrity of those subsurface layers. When aquifers are full, water pressure supports the sediment framework. A significant portion of the weight of overlying soil and rock is borne by water filling pore spaces. Remove that water faster than it can be naturally replaced, and the pressure collapses. The sediments must bear more load. In sandy and gravelly layers, that added weight causes modest compaction that can partially reverse if water returns. But deep clay layers behave very differently, and far more dangerously. Clay particles are microscopic and plate-like. When saturated, they are separated by thin films of water. Remove that water, and the particles compress together. Under the immense pressure found thousands of feet underground, that compression becomes permanent. The particles bond. The structure collapses. Even if water later returns, the clay does not re-expand. The pore space is eliminated forever. The aquifer permanently loses storage capacity, and the land surface above drops accordingly. USGS records show this process has been occurring in the Central Valley for more than a century. Subsidence was documented as early as the 1920s. Back then, it was measured in inches per year and confined to localized areas. Surface water projects reduced reliance on groundwater, and early regulations created the belief that subsidence could be controlled. For a time, that assumption appeared valid. Then the system was pushed beyond its limits. Beginning around 2006, California entered a new climate regime, long droughts punctuated by short, intense wet periods. The drought from 2012 to 2016 was especially severe, with 2014 becoming the driest year in the state's recorded history. Surface water deliveries were slashed, sometimes to zero. Farmers faced an impossible choice: allow crops to fail or pump groundwater to survive. They pumped. Wells were deepened. New wells were drilled to unprecedented depths, some exceeding 2,000 feet. These wells tapped fossil groundwater that had not been replenished in thousands of years. Pumping rates surged far beyond historical norms, and the ground responded faster than scientists anticipated. Multiple independent monitoring systems confirm the collapse. INSAR satellite radar measures ground movement with millimeter precision by comparing repeated satellite passes. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory mapped subsidence across the entire Central Valley, revealing vast areas sinking more than 1 foot per year during peak droughts, with some locations approaching 2 feet annually. Ground-based GPS stations and extensometers confirm the satellite data. An extensometer near Pixley, California, has recorded more than 13 feet of cumulative subsidence. The pattern is unmistakable. During droughts, subsidence accelerates sharply. During wet periods, it slows, but it does not stop. Deep clay layers continue compacting long after pumping declines because the damage was already locked in. Stanford's November 2024 synthesis quantified what field scientists had feared. From 2006 to 2022, the Central Valley lost more elevation than it did from 1925 to 2006 combined. Areas once sinking inches per year are now sinking feet per year. Roughly 90% of current subsidence is occurring in deep clay layers, meaning it is essentially irreversible regardless of future groundwater management. The infrastructure consequences cascade outward. The California Aqueduct, engineered with precise gradients, has been warped by uneven sinking. Low spots collect water. High spots restrict flow. Operators must reduce throughput simply to keep the system functional. The Friant-Kern Canal is worse. Along a 33-mile stretch, subsidence has reversed the slope entirely. Water must now move uphill. Capacity has dropped to roughly 40%. A $400 million repair project aims to lower the canal bed, but engineers acknowledge it only delays failure. The ground will continue sinking. Roads crack. Rail lines misalign. Bridges deform. Buildings develop structural damage. Irrigation systems fail as fields lose levelness. Well casings buckle as surrounding sediments compact unevenly, crushing steel pipes once assumed permanent. The most destructive loss remains invisible. When deep clay layers collapse, they eliminate future water storage. Even decades of above-average rainfall cannot restore what has been destroyed. The aquifer system can never hold as much water again. Future droughts will strike faster and harder because the underground buffer that once sustained the region has already been partially erased. Human consequences spread rapidly. Since 2013, more than 4,200 domestic wells have gone dry, a figure widely acknowledged as an undercount. Families wake to air in their taps. Replacement wells cost tens of thousands of dollars, far beyond what many rural residents can afford. Water trucks become lifelines. Agricultural wells race deeper, triggering a classic tragedy of the commons. The deepest wells draw water from regional aquifers, lowering pressure for everyone else. Neighbors are forced to drill deeper just to survive. The arms race accelerates depletion and subsidence. Costs explode. Deeper wells require larger pumps and far more electricity. Operations viable at 300 feet become financially impossible at 1,500 or 2,000 feet. Some farmers abandon land. Others switch to lower value crops. Land values decline. Multi-generation farms face extinction. The implications extend far beyond California. The Central Valley produces roughly 40% of U.S. fruits, nuts, and vegetables by value, and grows more than 250 different crops. There are no replacement regions ready to absorb that production. Any major contraction would ripple through global markets, raising food prices, increasing food insecurity, and forcing fundamental restructuring of supply chains. California's policy response arrived late. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, passed in 2014, mandates groundwater balance by 2040. But irreversible damage continues during that window. Stanford modeling shows subsidence persists for decades even after pumping stabilizes. Achieving balance means less water, less land in production, and economic disruption communities resist. Estimates suggest up to 1 million acres may need to be retired. Managed aquifer recharge helps, but only partially. It requires surplus water that climate change increasingly limits. It works best in permeable soils that much of the valley lacks. And it cannot repair collapsed deep clay layers responsible for most irreversible subsidence. Climate change compounds every weakness. Snowpack declines. Melt comes earlier. Rain falls harder and runs off faster. Recharge opportunities shrink as extremes increase. Crops require more water just as supplies grow less reliable. Today, despite improved precipitation in 2023, the ground keeps sinking. INSAR data from 2025 shows elevated subsidence rates persist. Infrastructure damage accumulates. Groundwater plans advance. But true sustainability remains unlikely in many basins. Even perfect policy cannot restore what has already collapsed. The system that feeds America was built on the assumption of stability. Physics has proven otherwise. Deep clay layers do not respond to legislation. They do not rebound when water returns. The damage is permanent. So the question remains, are we managing the Central Valley towards sustainability or documenting the irreversible decline of America's most productive agricultural region? Has aquifer capacity been permanently destroyed by decades of groundwater mining we never acknowledged was finite? And will food systems built for a climate and water regime that no longer exists be forced to transform faster than markets or policies can adapt? The ground is already sinking. The deepest damage is already done. And it will continue compounding, tracked relentlessly by satellites, sensors, and instruments, as California's Central Valley descends, inch by inch, into a future it can no longer escape.